Section 1 Hook. I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually think about it before you move on. Have you ever sabotaged your own financial progress? Not through a major catastrophic mistake, but through a pattern, a habit, a recurring behavior that you noticed, maybe even named, and still could not stop. You got a bonus and spent it before it meant anything. You started building savings and then found a reason to deplete them. You knew what you should do with money, you even planned to do it, and then quietly did something else, and then felt frustration or shame that is almost impossible to explain to someone who has not felt it. If any part of that resonates with you, I need you to hear this clearly. You are not undisciplined. You are not lazy. You are not bad with money. What you are is human carrying a set of beliefs about money that were handed to you before you were old enough to evaluate them, installed in environments that shaped your nervous system's relationship with wealth before you could choose otherwise. And those beliefs, invisible, automatic, often completely unconscious, are running your financial decisions from the background with more influence than any budget or investment strategy you have ever tried to implement on top of them. A 2025 Bankrate survey found that 43% of Americans say money is negatively impacting their mental health, not their bank account, their mental health. The relationship most people have with money is not a neutral financial relationship, it is an emotional one. And the emotional layer is where self-sabotage lives. Today, we are going into that layer, not to be therapeutic for its own sake, but because understanding why you behave the way you do with money is the prerequisite for changing that behavior in any lasting way. Information alone has never been enough. If it were, everyone who has watched financial content would be wealthy. The missing piece is almost always psychological. And that is exactly what we are going to cover today. Section 2, where your money beliefs actually come from. Financial psychologists use a term called money scripts, the subconscious beliefs about money that each of us carries, most of which were formed before the age of 10, not learned consciously, not chosen, absorbed from the environment we grew up in, through observation, experience, and the emotional intensity of early money memories. Here is how early this begins. Research from the University of Cambridge shows that children's financial attitudes and habits are essentially set by age 7. By the time most people have their first job or their first real financial decision to make, they are already operating from a belief system about money that is years old and almost entirely invisible to them. They are not making financial decisions based on financial logic. They are making financial decisions based on their 7-year-old interpretation of what money means, what it is safe to do with it, who deserves it, and what happens when you have too much or too little. There are 4 broad categories of money scripts that researchers have identified, and most people carry at least one, often more than one, in tension with each other. Money avoidance people with money avoidance beliefs carry some version of the idea that money is bad, corrupting, or dangerous, that wealthy people are greedy, that wanting money is selfish, that having more than enough is somehow wrong. These beliefs often come from growing up in religious households with strong anti-materialism messages, from families where money was a source of conflict and pain, or from communities where wealth was associated with exploitation or injustice. The behavioral result: unconsciously pushing money away, neglecting finances, giving money away before it accumulates to a threatening level, feeling guilty when income increases, choosing lower-paying work that feels more morally comfortable. Money worship, the opposite of avoidance, the belief that more money will solve everything, that happiness, security, love, and worth all come from financial achievement. People with this script work compulsively, often at the expense of relationships and health, believing that the next income level will finally be enough. It never is. Because the belief is not actually about money, it is about filling a void that money cannot touch. The behavioral result: overworking, financial obsession, inability to enjoy what has already been earned, perpetual dissatisfaction regardless of income level. Money status: the belief that financial worth and personal worth are the same thing. Net worth equals self-worth. This script drives status-based spending, buying things not because they are needed or genuinely wanted, but because of the signal they send about social position. The behavioral result: spending to perform wealth rather than to build it. Keeping up with peer groups regardless of the financial consequences. Buying cars and clothes and vacations that communicate a financial reality that does not actually exist. This is the script behind what we called fake wealth in a previous video, the appearance of abundance maintained at the cost of actual abundance. Most people reading this or listening to this carry elements of multiple scripts simultaneously. A scarcity-conditioned background that creates money vigilance and some avoidance. A culture that promotes money worship through status. A family that modeled a specific relationship with debt, with saving, with spending, that became the default template regardless of whether it was functional. Section 3. The Scarcity Trap. How financial fear makes worse decisions of all the psychological patterns that block wealth. The scarcity mindset is the most studied, the most well-documented, and in a country where nearly half of adults cannot cover a $1,000 emergency, the most widespread. Here is what the research shows about how scarcity actually changes the brain. A Princeton and Harvard study, popularized in the book Scarcity by behavioral economists Sendhil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir, found that people experiencing financial scarcity genuinely worrying about having enough show measurable cognitive tunneling. Their mental bandwidth narrows. They become intensely focused on the immediate financial problem at the expense of longer-term thinking, planning, and judgment. The study found the cognitive impact of financial scarcity was equivalent to losing 13 IQ points. Not permanently. Situationally, when scarcity is active and salient, but the implications are significant. A person worried about making rent this month is cognitively impaired temporarily, measurably in their ability to think about their financial future next year. The scarcity mind cannot think long-term effectively, because long-term thinking requires mental bandwidth that scarcity has already consumed. And here is where it becomes a trap rather than just a challenge. Early research from the therapist Calm Financial Trauma Database shows that people who face adulthood with a scarcity mindset regardless of their actual income tend to spend more than people without it and make worse financial decisions on average. The scarcity mindset is not just a response to not having money. It is a lens installed by past experience that continues filtering present decisions long after the financial situation has changed. This is why people with genuinely improved financial situations still behave financially as though they are struggling. The income changed. The environment changed. The money script did not. A person who grew up in a household where money was always scarce and anxious carries that scarcity template into their adult financial decisions, spending impulsively when they have money, because the subconscious expectation is that it will be gone soon anyway. Avoiding financial planning because it activates anxiety rather than empowerment. Keeping too much cash rather than investing because the primal fear of running out is stronger than any rational argument about compounding returns. A 2026 PLOS One study confirmed that the scarcity mindset transcends income status. It found that even high-income individuals with a scarcity mindset made significantly worse financial decisions than lower-income individuals without it. The mindset is more predictive of financial behavior than the bank balance. This is the research that should fundamentally change how we talk about wealth building, because it reveals that the obstacle for most people is not information or income. It is psychology. Section 4. The 5 Faces of Financial Self-Sabotage. Self-sabotage is not one behavior. It is a family of behaviors, each with a different surface appearance, but often the same psychological root. Here are the 5 most common ones, and I want you to notice which ones feel familiar. 1. Lifestyle inflation. As emotional regulation. Every time income increases, spending rises to match or exceed it. Not because the person needs more, but because spending provides emotional relief from the anxiety that comes with having more. For people with money avoidance scripts, accumulating wealth activates discomfort. It conflicts with the belief that wealth is bad or undeserved, and spending it away resolves that discomfort. For people with scarcity backgrounds, spending is also a response to the unconscious expectation that the money will be gone soon. Spend it now, before something takes it. The behavioral result is a financial life that progresses in income, but not in net worth, regardless of how much is earned. 2. Financial avoidance. Not opening the credit card statement. Not looking at the investment account when the market is volatile. Not doing the budget. Not tracking the spending. Not running the retirement calculation that would reveal how far behind things actually are. Financial avoidance is the behavioral equivalent of not looking at the problem, because looking at it activates an emotional response: shame, fear, overwhelm that the brain is trying to prevent. The avoidance provides short-term relief at the cost of compounding long-term damage. Every month the statement goes unopened. The problem grows, and the shame of how far behind things have gotten makes opening the statement even harder. 3. Income ceiling. Unconsciously limiting earnings. This one is subtle and surprisingly well documented. People with strong money avoidance or money status scripts frequently self-limit their income at a specific level, an unconscious wealth thermostat that feels uncomfortable to exceed. They turn down promotions that feel like too much responsibility or would make them seem greedy to their community. They undercharge for freelance work. They stay in underpaid roles because the identity of person who does not care about money is more comfortable than the identity of someone who actively pursues high earnings. The limit is not financial, it is identity-based. Exceeding the income level that feels normal and safe triggers psychological discomfort that the person resolves by unconsciously shrinking back down. Section 5. What actually changes the pattern here is the part where I could give you a list of positive affirmations and call it a day. I am not going to do that. Not because affirmations are useless. Repetition of new beliefs does have neurological impact, but because the research on sustainable behavior change points to something more structural than positive thinking. The first and most important step is awareness with specificity, not a general sense that your relationship with money is complicated. Specific identification of your dominant money scripts. Which of the 4 scripts resonated most with you earlier in this video? If you do not know, think about the earliest strong memory you have involving money. What did it teach you? What emotion does it carry? That memory is likely close to the origin of a script that is still active today. Cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the most well-researched approaches to behavior change, works precisely on this principle. Identify the thought pattern, examine the evidence for and against it, and systematically replace catastrophic or distorted thinking with more accurate and functional beliefs. Applied to money, this means identifying the specific belief: money is dangerous. I do not deserve wealth. Spending brings comfort. I will lose it anyway. Examining where it came from, evaluating whether it is actually true, and deliberately building alternative beliefs through repetition and behavioral evidence. The second step is structural design. Once you are aware of your pattern, you build systems that make self-sabotage mechanically harder. Automatic investment contributions on payday, so the money is deployed before the scarcity response can flag it as threatening. A dedicated spending buffer, a specific monthly amount designated for discretionary and emotional spending, so emotional spending has a container rather than a veto over the entire financial plan. Setting up investment accounts so they require 2 or more steps to access, creating friction that interrupts impulsive withdrawal during market anxiety. These are behavioral design solutions to behavioral problems. They work because they reduce the number of moments where the old belief system gets a chance to activate. The third step, and this one is genuinely important, is recognizing when professional support is appropriate. Financial therapy is a real and growing field that sits at the intersection of financial planning and mental health. If your money patterns feel rooted in something deeper trauma, significant anxiety, grief, or family dynamics that have never been examined, a financial therapist or a therapist with financial literacy training can address the root in ways that a budget spreadsheet never will. The investment in that support is frequently worth more in long-term financial outcomes than any investment strategy, because it removes the invisible force that undermines every strategy before it can work. Section 6, the bottom line plus. Call to action. Let me close with the thing I most want you to carry out of this video. Your financial situation is the sum of your financial behavior. Your financial behavior is the output of your financial beliefs, and your financial beliefs were largely not chosen. They were inherited from your family, from your community, from early experiences with money that shaped your nervous system's response to it before you had any say in the matter. That is not an excuse for inaction. It is an explanation that makes action possible. Because once you understand that your patterns are learned, you can understand that they are learnable in the other direction. Beliefs that were installed without your consent can be replaced with ones you consciously choose. The brain is plastic throughout life. Patterns that have been running for decades can be interrupted, examined, and gradually replaced with ones that serve the financial life you are trying to build. The information in every other video on this channel, the investing strategies, the tax frameworks, the budgeting systems, those are the right tools. But they only work when the psychological layer underneath them is not actively undermining them. This is the layer most financial content never addresses. And it is the layer that, for most people, is doing the most work. Your action from this video. Take 10 quiet minutes today and write down the earliest money memory you can recall. What happened? Who was there? What did you feel? What did you conclude about money from that experience? Do not judge the answer. Just notice it. That memory is probably closer to the origin of your current money pattern than anything you learned as an adult. Seeing it clearly is the first crack in the foundation of the belief that has been running your financial life in the background. Drop a comment below. Which of the 5 self-sabotage patterns felt most familiar to you? I want to know, not to judge, but because understanding where this community is psychologically helps me create content that actually meets you where you are. Subscribe for a new video every week, and I will see you in the next one.